How's it going, everybody? My name is Franco, and you're watching Hear Me Out Podcast and Frank Analysis. And today I'm going to share with you guys an experience that I had with Leo Gouda of Actualize.org that changed my perspective on him. And I just want to bring that to people's awareness and to go into his videos with a conscious mind, knowing that he's not always going to be right on things, and sometimes he might even be deluded. I'm not telling people to unsubscribe from him. I'm just telling people to listen to him with a conscious mind. To start off my story, I came across Leo's videos, when I was going through a lot in my life, much like a lot of you guys. A lot of us were feeling depressed, or some of us were lacking confidence, and then we came across an Actualize.org video, and then some of those tips that he offers really benefited our lives. And a lot of the stuff that he would say in his videos really helped me out. His videos from like 2017 and 2018 especially. And I'm also a person who's very into politics. Ever since 2016, I was very invested into politics, and some of the things that Leo taught me really helped me see things very objectively. It helped me to be aware of my biases and to pay more attention to what's objective and what has the most evidence. But what concerned me is that Leo was not applying his teachings to his perspective on politics, because he would bring up Donald Trump in a lot of his examples. And I myself am not a Trump supporter. I supported Bernie Sanders in 2016, and in 2020 I supported Tulsi Gabbard. And I by no means judge anybody for who they support. Everybody has a reason for why they support who they support. And if you support Donald Trump, I have no problem with you. My thing is just to present you guys with objective facts about certain candidates. And then hopefully that raises your consciousness, and that could potentially change your perspective on who you support. But I by no means judge people for who they support. What I have a problem with is if you have a platform and you present yourself as being this very conscious and spiritual person, and then you're not aware of your biases, and then you present misinformation to your audience. And that's what Leo was doing. In many of his examples, he would call Donald Trump the most corrupt president of all time. And at first I would make excuses and be like, he probably just means his personality, like Trump's personality. And because, Trump is pretty out there sometimes with the way that he presents himself. Like, there's no way. I was thinking, I'm sure that Leo is conscious enough to be aware that he doesn't know the 44 other presidents enough to say that Donald Trump is the most corrupt president. Because even the most recent history with George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and then Bill Clinton in the 90s and Ronald Reagan, they were corrupt. They were very corrupt. They were bought out by corporations, and they went into all these wars. They would lie to the American people to get into all these wars, and they killed millions of people. They made the corporations stronger. They helped make the income inequality between the rich and the poor get bigger and bigger. It's a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue. And Donald Trump is a symptom of that systemic problem. People voted for him because they were sick and tired of politicians, like professional politicians, career politicians, telling them that they're going to do things for them, and then they don't do it. That's why Donald Trump was able to beat out all the career Republican politicians in the primaries, and then he defeated Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton was just offering more of the same, and she failed to campaign in states where she needed to campaign in. What the mainstream media did, and what the Democrats did, is that to save themselves from embarrassment of losing to a reality TV show host like Donald Trump, is that they orchestrated a narrative to blame an external source, that it was Russia that interfered in our election, and they helped Trump win, and that Trump colluded with them. And then for 2 years, our intelligence agencies investigated it. Robert Mueller's report came out, 2019, and it resulted in absolutely no evidence that there was any collusion or any interference at all. They said that they might have interfered, but they don't present any evidence at all to suggest that they interfered. And there was many credible journalists that spent the 2 years during that investigation debunking a lot of mainstream media narratives about this. There was Aaron Mate primarily, Jimmy Dore, who had Aaron Mate on a lot to debunk the Russiagate narrative that was presented by the mainstream media, and other YouTube outlets like the Young Turks who bought into this stuff. And Matt Taibbi, also Caitlin Johnstone, Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept. These were credible journalists that were presenting very meticulous evidence to debunk the Russiagate narrative. What's so problematic about this believing the Russiagate stuff and hyper-focusing on that and hyper-focusing on the little things that Trump does, like his tweets and all that, is that this distracts from all the other damaging things that Trump is doing. Like, you're not focusing on him putting kids in cages, which the Obama administration built, by the way. You're not looking at how he's increasing sanctions on Russia, on how he pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. Iran, which is Russia's ally, by the way. So by pulling out of that nuclear deal, how can you say that he's working for Russia if you're actively working against Russia's allies? And not just Iran, but Trump is also bombing Syria, which Assad is Putin's ally. And it concerned me that Leo was not aware of this stuff. And even after the Mueller report, he was still buying into the Russiagate narrative. So I felt like what the conscious thing to do is that if I know something that somebody else doesn't know, is to let them know. Present them with information that they have not come across. And I was being understanding of it. I was like, okay, Leo probably hasn't come across this information. I'm sure he's open-minded enough to not have Trump derangement syndrome like the Young Turks or all these other mainstream media outlets do. Now, if you don't know what Trump derangement syndrome is that it's this notion that you cloud yourself, biases, in your hatred towards Trump, that you think that everything that he does is wrong to the point where you become hypocritical. So I made an account on actualize.org on the forum, and it was the first post that I made. I was like, Leo, I appreciate all the things that you do in helping people and trying to raise their consciousness about spirituality and giving us all these practices to benefit our lives. But when it comes to Russiagate, I think you're overlooking these pieces of evidence. Here they are. There's Glenn Greenwald, there's Aaron Mate, there's Matt Taibbi, there's Caitlin Johnstone. There's all these people that have debunked Russiagate throughout the years. And then the Mueller report revealed that there was no evidence at all of any Trump-Russia collusion. And then he responded to me in a way that really surprised me. He responded to me with calling me gullible, and he was treating me like a doormat, making me feel like I was dumb and that there's no question that Trump is corrupt and that he colluded with Russia. And I was like, no, Leo, I just showed you all this evidence, and the Mueller report didn't reveal any of this stuff. And then he just kept replying with things like making me feel like I'm not conscious enough, and that I'm easily duped, and that I'm not at his level. And then one of his moderators stepped in and started arguing with me about it. And then Leo stepped away. He disappeared. And then that argument ended up with people seeing that I was the one that was being objective, and that the other guy was overlooking certain things. And then we came across other arguments, me and that moderator. And most people in the forum would agree with me. They're like, this person is being more objective. He's presenting more information than the other person. Now in the forum, there were even some moderators that would appear later on in random discussions that I would have that would tell me that they agreed with me with the Russiagate stuff, that they believe that it lacks evidence. And other people would call them out and say, okay, why don't you call out Leo then? So it seems like there's this fear that some of these moderators have with going against what Leo talks about, because they're afraid of getting demoted or eventually getting banned. Now, in the forum, I would also notice that Leo would always make hateful comments towards Trump, and he would call his supporters stupid and all that. And I would tell him, look, Leo, you don't know enough about other past presidents. You're looking too much, you're hyper-focusing too much on Trump, and you're not looking at the overall systemic problems that gave us Trump. And he was still holding on to that Russiagate conspiracy theory. He's saying that he's corrupt, he money laundered with Russia, and I was like, that just because he had financial ties with them about something that's irrelevant to politics with his hotels doesn't mean that they colluded. And then I would mention how Hillary Clinton and other people who worked in her campaign, that they had more financial ties with Russia than Donald Trump. And then Leo would respond and say, oh no, he is doing things for Russia. And I was like, what is he doing? And he wouldn't give me any examples. Leo would never give me any evidence to support his side of the argument. He would only give me evidence that was already debunked, and I would tell him this is debunked. The evidence you're giving me is debunked. Or he just wouldn't reply at all. And then he'd come back and still hold on to this notion. It's almost as if like he would ignore all the evidence that I would present to him. And not just me, other people too. Just so he can hold on to that idea of Trump being so corrupt. And he just wants to hold on to that belief so badly. And he's not even conscious about it. And then there were other people that would reply to me and tell me that they're also concerned about Leo, and that his perspectives are being clouded by his identity of being a Democrat. Now, what Leo is doing here is that he's not applying the lessons of the Book of Not Knowing. He believes in many assumptions. Like I said, he doesn't know that Trump is the most corrupt president of all time, yet he says it with confidence. He hasn't studied all the presidents that have existed, and he doesn't even acknowledge how corrupt the most recent presidents have been, as I mentioned earlier. So this really questions his credibility with other teachings. And people and his viewers who may not have studied spirituality as much can get easily duped, since he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. There's a channel called Adeptus Psychonautica, which made a video, I think it was like 2 months ago, where he's discussing the delusions of grandeur that Leo now has. And he started to believe that he's this messiah and superior than everyone else. And that he's banning people from his forums and deleting people's comments on his videos that don't agree with the things that he says. And that's essentially creating an echo chamber and gives off the sense of a cult. And Leo did end up banning me from his forum. And that was because when the whole Iowa caucus fiasco that happened, in which in Iowa, the Iowa primaries, there was a lot of conflicts of interest and a lot of instances of cheating that were happening, and there was video evidence of it. There was a lot of other on the ground pieces of evidence, and the conflict of interest was that Pete Buttigieg had supporters, had staffers that were involved in making the app. He had financial ties with people who made the app. This is after the DNC in 2016, which was revealed by WikiLeaks, that they had colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign to work against Bernie Sanders. I pointed out in the forum, it's by no coincidence that a lot of the errors that are happening by this app are going in favor of Pete Buttigieg. None of these errors ever go in favor of Bernie Sanders or any other anti-establishment candidate. And then Leo had the nerve to call us, who were concerned about this and who were aware of the history of the DNC and their cheating in the past, he was calling us conspiracy theorists. The DNC, which is facing a lawsuit And in a court hearing that they had, the judge said that since the DNC is a private entity, they can choose whoever they want to be the nominee. And then there was other people pointing out that Leo never admits when he's wrong. And then I was mentioning all I want is for Leo to admit that he's wrong, to show spiritual growth as an example for his followers. Because you can't mislead people and misinform them when you have a large platform like that, and then when people present you with evidence, you can't just ignore that. And then he ended up banning me after I said that. And then I saw that somebody else was mentioning that there was other people that saw how I was being objective, and they were arguing with me, pointing out a lot of biases that Leo has and a lot of things that he's overlooking. And then Leo banned them too. So to me, that doesn't sound like a very conscious person, and it was very disappointing. And I checked on the forum recently, and he's still putting out hateful comments towards Trump, calling him stupid, blah blah blah. And what this is he's distracting himself and hyper focusing too much on Donald Trump and all these little things, and that he's ignoring the systemic problems of the country. Somebody who's very aware of the political problems in our country, they're not going to hyper focus on Donald Trump. They're going to criticize other politicians as well, like especially the corporate Democrats that act like they're helping out the people and that act like they're these saints, but they're doing the same thing as the Republicans are, and they're actively working against the people by passing all these policies that favor the corporations and in the end screws us over, the working class people. So I told my fiance about this because she saw my life improve after I listened to actualize.org, but I told her about how I feel like I can no longer listen to him because him not recognizing certain biases about himself and not noticing his arrogance and his lack of consciousness when it comes to politics could also be reflected in some of his other perspectives on epistemology and spirituality and consciousness, that he's reached a point where he's very arrogant. I'm very concerned to continue to listen to him. And she replied to me with a message, and she said, I think I've heard a saying once that at some point a teacher can no longer offer much to a student. The student starts to realize more truths beyond the teacher's knowledge, and of course, a human teacher's ego will get bruised and they'll get mad. But at that point, it's best for them to separate, and the student either goes on their own journey of truth or finds a new teacher who's more knowledgeable. Leo could only offer so much in spirituality, and even then, he's not a master at it. He can offer helpful tips and information he's learned through experiences, but he still has a lot of his own faults. I guess he can't see them or refuses to see them like how most humans do. So it's up to the people following him to realize this and decide when to leave. And then this part's funny, which I'll get into my response to this part. My fiance also said, and honestly, a lot of what he talked about was some dumb shit that doesn't even matter, like that green, yellow, turquoise shit. She's talking about spiral dynamics. Do you think it really matters to put a label on what conscious stage you're at? Because then all you do is compare yourself to others, when really you just need to experience and feel your consciousness. So I replied to her by saying, thank you. You were very insightful here. And I told her the stages he would use were only on values. Spiral dynamics is only about values, not an overall consciousness stage. Another book I read by Ken Wilber called The Religion of Tomorrow has a more integrative and accurate approach to consciousness level stages, and I highly recommend you guys read that. But this integrative approach to determine people's consciousness level. I mean, it integrates spiral dynamics as well as other stuff like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and a whole bunch of other stuff. It integrates a whole bunch of other stuff like spiral dynamics, because spiral dynamics only looks at your values. And I mentioned to my fiance that I think it was too complex for Leo to explain Ken Wilber's integrative consciousness stages, so he stuck with the easier to explain spiral dynamics concept to explain to people. Spiral dynamics doesn't consider so many other aspects of a person's consciousness. And then I mentioned how Jimmy Dore is more politically conscious than Leo. I stand by that. But Jimmy Dore, just because he's more politically conscious, doesn't mean that he's going to be as conscious as Leo on conceptualizing reality or at controlling his emotions. But Jimmy Dore, he's more aware in a subconscious way that informing people and pushing for change and understanding the system is taking care of the extended self, the true self, like Leo likes to say, with a capital T and a capital S, true self. That true self is the people that you interact with, the environment that you interact with. If you care for those things, you're not just going to hyper focus on your own spirituality. You're going to try to raise consciousness to everyone else, understand the systemic problems that are happening in our world, and try to work to solve those problems, building connections with people, working with them to try to improve our society that's affected by the systemic problems. And I mentioned how, I'll keep his book list, but I'm not going to follow anything else that he does. And I'm going to expand and integrate other books that I think are helpful. So I'm not just gonna use his book list, I'm also gonna read other books. For example, I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which is not on Leo's book list. I read a lot of political books, The Management of Savagery by Max Blumenthal, American Exceptionalism and American Innocence by Danny Haiphong and Robert Servant, Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank, and many others. Like, I'm gonna integrate Chris Hedges' book also. So that's all I have for you guys. Just be conscious about who you listen to. Be aware that they're human too. Don't think of them as these like all-knowing prophets, because Leo's on his journey and he's going through his process of realizing himself. And if you start to notice certain things about your teacher where they're not recognizing certain truths that you see, then maybe you should part ways, because what's the point of listening to them, of continuing to listen to them when they're being stubborn about some of the things that they believe in, despite all the evidence that's presented to them to show them that they're wrong. So it's good to diversify your sources. Don't just listen to Leo. Why I was able to see past his political biases and his Trump derangement syndrome is because I listened to other sources besides him. I would listen to other political YouTube channels that try to be objective. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. Please support so that my channel can grow. I offer a lot of analysis on what's happening in politics. I have on a lot of guests to discuss what's happening and to discuss certain things that they focus on, to expand not only my political consciousness but also everybody else's political consciousness.